Welcome to New Directions for Women, a program of the Morris County chapter of the National Organization for Women. My name is Rebecca Lubetkin, and I and the entire crew here, the entire production crew, are members of this chapter of NOW. And we're all volunteers. This is a labor of love for us. We have day jobs, and this is what we do when we're not doing our day jobs for fun. We are in our 18th year of working together, and I think this is the 219th show. And all of our shows are archived in the Sophia Smith collection at Smith College, and they're also available on YouTube. There it is on the screen, www.youtube.com/MCNOWNJ. So we are very excited about today's program. It's something that has been of interest and that we have talked about before, but this is going to be a very special slant. Our title is Human Trafficking, a Global Issue, a Community Problem. And as I said, we've discussed this issue before and focused primarily on labor trafficking. And today we will discuss sex trafficking, the exploitation and enslaving of people, both American and from other countries, with particular attention to what local communities can do. And we're very fortunate to have Joseph Burlett, a committed activist, as our guest. Joseph Burlett joined the U.S. Army at 17. After finishing his service, he began a law enforcement career as a sheriff's deputy in Florida. That experience exposed him to issues of trafficking, so that after completing his bachelor's degree at St. John's University in legal studies, actually with the intention of going to law school, right? Yeah. This year he made the decision to devote himself instead to issues of trafficking, and he subsequently established the Human Trafficking Awareness Council as a nonprofit corporation in New Jersey.
Right.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Very glad you could be with us. And I want to start by asking you just a little something about yourself, but particularly the area of how you got interested in human trafficking.
Well, you know, when I worked in law enforcement, I didn't really know about human trafficking. A lot of during the police academies and stuff, they don't train you on human trafficking. It's like a growing phenomenon that we haven't quite caught up to. While I was working in Florida, though, there was a case that involved 3 girls from Guatemala. I believe one was 9 years old, one was 13 years old, yeah, and one was 15. And a husband and wife, Mexican nationals, they purchased them at an auction in Texas and then had them transported to Florida, where they lived in Fort Lauderdale. Once they got to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, they were forced into prostitution, and they had to have sex with up to 15 to 20 guys a day, 7 days a week.
Even this 9-year-old?
Yeah. Yep. And the girls actually slept. They had a...
Were they sisters?
No, they weren't related.
Did their parents know what happened to them?
No, most of the times they're manipulated. A lot of people from the city go into these small little villages, and they paint a picture of, you know, going to school, going to America, learning English, and the parents let their children go.
Good future.
Right.
Yeah.
And then once they get over there in America, it's completely different than what they expected. The parents usually never hear from their children again. But what happened was these 3 girls, they were actually rescued. You know, the federal government and the local government over there did investigations. They rescued these 3 girls. The husband and wife went to court, but when trials came around, they could have got up to 30 years in prison. Instead, they received 3 years in prison.
How is that?
And I don't know. I mean, the legal system, I believe what happened was they were originally charged with human trafficking, and then what is very common in the United States is they reduce the crime to get them to plead out. Mm-hmm. And they actually pleaded to, I believe, endangering the welfare of a child, which is the same thing that you would get if you left your kids home alone while you were at work. And that only served a sentence of 3 years. In Florida, it's a minimum mandatory where you only do 80% of that time. So they're out of prison right now.
And the girls?
The girls, I'm not sure what happened to them because they were minors. There was a lot of information that wasn't disclosed, and it wasn't in an area where I worked because I worked up by Daytona Beach. They were actually in Fort Lauderdale, so I wasn't really aware of what was going on. I know I did make phone calls to the prosecutor's office, to the judge's chambers, and reporters and departments down there, but when everything came through, it was just kind of like, it is what it is. You know, they got 3 years, they're in jail, the girls are getting treatment, it's justice. But
the good that came out of it, though, was that you became interested.
Right, yeah. Actually, I started doing research, and I just felt that was injustice. You know, I didn't think justice was served there. So I basically gave a 30-day notice at the sheriff's department, and I resigned. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that, you know, there was something else that I had to do. And 3 years later, or 2.5 years later, the HTA Council was formed.
You formed it?
Right, yeah.
You formed it in New Jersey?
Yeah, it was formed in New Jersey. I actually, on March 17th, nothing really happened. It was just a normal day, you know. The next day was Wednesday, March 18th, 2011. I woke up in the morning and I had a mind full of ideas. I started writing them down on a piece of paper, and I started calling my old friends, my old coworkers, and I said, hey, look, this is what I want to do. I think we can pull this off. Do you want to do it with me? And then some of my coworkers came on board, and then we had a board of directors, and by the end of that day, we were a nonprofit corporation.
How great.
Yeah.
So you really moved ahead once you got the idea?
It wasn't planned. Originally, I planned on being in law school in September, but this came about a couple months before that, and now I'm actually doing a master's for economic development and social justice. So I'll be going to Europe for 3 months, and then I'll be traveling the world.
As part of your master's?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it's a master's program through St. John's University.
Very good.
So yeah.
Interesting. Just for the sake of our really understanding the scope of the problem, do we have any idea, say in the U.S., of how many slaves we're talking about?
No, it's really hard to tell, and you know, there's so many conflicting numbers because nonprofits, their evidence says that the numbers are very high. Some governments say that their numbers are very low. Obviously, there's political issues there, funding issues, as well as companies who profit from these crimes, so they want to keep their numbers low, like the Village Voice and stuff. So basically, we're looking at, I mean, there's at least over 1 million slaves in the world, in the United States, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
In the U.S.?
Yeah.
And are most of these foreign-born, or?
No, most of them are American-born.
American.
Yeah, there was a study done in 2008 by, I believe it's the Shared Hope International. They did a study, first study ever done in the United States, funded by the United States Department of Justice, and their determination came back with every year between 100 and 300,000 children fall victims to this crime that are American-born, and at least 50,000 foreign-born children or men and women are brought into this country for trafficking every year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what percentage of that, does anybody know what percentage are women and girls?
Yeah, about 80% are women and children. Well, 80% are women, 50% are children, is the general average nationally. As far as the United States, it's very hard to determine that.
So that sex trafficking is just one of the areas of trafficking of women, but it seems to be...
Right. Sex trafficking is the largest demand. There is a labor trafficking. They have organ trafficking, child soldiers, but sex trafficking is the big moneymaker. And human trafficking in general generates about $32 billion a year as of 2010.
In this country?
No, around the world.
Around the world?
Yeah. So, but most of that is from sex trafficking.
And what is sex trafficking?
Sex trafficking is the sexual exploitation of a person, whether it be a man, woman, or child, and it's used for the benefit of someone else. So a willing prostitute, you know, they would go out on the street and work, but that money goes to them. A sex trafficking victim goes out on the street just like a prostitute, but that money is taken from them, and they don't receive anything.
And they're not prostitutes.
And well, they are prostitutes by definition, but they're not willingly doing what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean, probably close to 90% of the women that are out there prostituting, they were abused as a child. You know, there's psychological factors that put them in that line of work, because a normal person wouldn't willingly say that's what I want to do for a living.
right.
So, and that kind of leads into, you know, the fact that in the United States, 1 out of 4 girls and 1 out of 6 boys are sexually molested before the age of 18. And this is very unreported. So they actually suspect those numbers to be much higher. So when you look at, you know, the sexual abuse and stuff that's going on that's underreported, and there's no services out there to provide aid, that kind of opens them up to a vulnerable situation where now they can become a victim of human trafficking.
They could become prey.
Right.
So what is it about enslaving people that makes it so attractive as a criminal enterprise? Because we used to have arms dealers, there was a lot of that going on, drugs,
right.
And yet it seems as though this is very attractive to people in the business.
Well, financially, I personally think that it has to do with budgets in the United States, due to the simple fact that in the United States, say for instance, drug trafficking.
Yes.
Okay, drug crimes receive over about $1 billion or more for law enforcement to investigate and prosecute drug crimes. When you look at human trafficking, it's only, I believe, $170 million.
So we're not putting money into it?
No, we're not putting money into it. And the criminals know that we're not putting money into it. So a drug enforcement officer can't investigate a human trafficking case because it's out of his jurisdiction. If he stumbles on it, he can handle it, but most of the time they focus on drugs. They don't focus on human trafficking.
Right.
And criminals know this. So criminals, even drug dealers and the Mexican cartels and all that stuff, they're starting to get away from drugs and into human trafficking. One, because law enforcement isn't putting adequate budgets to prosecute these crimes. Two, they get more money for their expense. So, for instance, if you bring drugs across the border, you sell those drugs, it's a one-time transaction. Now you have to bring more drugs across the border. Right. If you bring a person across the border, you can exploit them for years before they become no longer usable to you, or they create...
And you can sell them, too.
Right, yeah, and there's a big secondary market where there's people that actually, it's like a assembly line where they train these girls and boys how to be what they want, and then they sell them for more money. Yeah.
And I understand even return some of these young girls to their pre-virgin condition, surgically.
Yeah, they go in and they sew the girls up to make them look like a virgin again, and then they actually sell them for more money as prostitutes. So a man will pay maybe $5,000 to have sex with a virgin, you know, when she's not really a virgin. And they'll do this several times before the body just no longer is able to be reconstructed. And
I imagine all kinds of diseases, that these young people are prey to all kinds of diseases from the...
Well, the men who purchase prostitutes, they generally demand that they're not going to use protection. They don't want to use protection. So that spreads all types of diseases, AIDS, you know, all types of STDs are being spread because they refuse to use protection. And when the victims demand that they do use protection, they'll get beat up by their pimps. So it spreads that
So who are the perpetrators? I mean, is it a criminal enterprise, as we used to speak about the mafia, with some people involved at a much lower level, or is it just kind of individuals operating?
Well, it's a mix because it's so profitable. You're seeing families get involved. You're seeing, you know, organized criminals get involved. I mean, just like my story that I first found out about it was with the husband and wife. They weren't organized crime. They're
just doing it on their own.
Blue collar people, yeah, and they just, for whatever reason, decided, hey, we can go and exploit these girls. And they made a lot of money. I mean, one victim of human trafficking can generate about $250,000 a year. And if they only cost, you know, less than $10,000, then it's a very profitable transaction.
Deal.
And that's why it's becoming so appealing to many people.
So how do they recruit American young people and foreign nationals?
Well, the foreign nationals, there's so many different ways that they get recruited. Sometimes the families sell them. Sometimes they're kidnapped off the street. Sometimes they're given an idea of a better life, and they're misled. But so that kind of varies, and it's so common that there's so many different ways to really get those people who are, you know, in underprivileged areas that want a better life.
And they think if they come here, they'll get it.
So it's easy to manipulate them and bring them here. But in the United States, surprisingly, I mean, a lot of our children here are falling victim to this crime due to internet. You know, they talk to people on Facebook and all these different things, and they don't know who they're talking to. You know, so when they go to the mall or they go somewhere to meet these people, they find out that they're not a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old boy or girl, but they're a 30 or 40-year-old man, and then they're taken away. Another big area is the malls, and you know, I mean, everybody knows that probably the past 10, 15 years, families they drop their kids off at the mall,
right,
and they go and do whatever they want to do on Friday, Saturday nights. Well, a lot of kids in the United States meet these predators at the mall. And then the predators build a rapport with these girls and boys, and next thing you know, the child's running away. And who do they run away with? With the predator that they met at the mall.
Right.
And you leave those kids unsupervised for 4, 5, 6 hours every week with this guy, then they start to feel like, hey, this guy's my friend. This guy's going to look out for me. He's going to help me.
Is there a certain profile of a child who's more likely to be pulled into this?
No, there's not. And that's why it's so important that communities actually take action and take initiative to create some type of change and program in their environment. No child, whether you're a child with, you know, living in an underprivileged area where your family might not make that much money and you're not going to school, or if you're a senator's daughter, you know, and you go to the best school, anybody at any time can be a victim. In 2010, a 33-year-old woman who was actually a professional woman, she worked in Manhattan, she was walking home after a happy hour, and she was pulled into a van and drove away.
Abducted.
Abducted, right, yep. And she was taken to Long Island, where she was raped up to 15, 20 times a day again with just random men that would come into the house. And it was a house in Long Island. And then somebody came in to purchase sex from her, and she, for whatever reason, asked for help, and he went to a payphone and called the police, and she was rescued. But this is a woman, you know, middle-aged woman, has a good job, lives in the city, and she's taken away right off the streets in a split second.
Looking at her, then, I know it used to be that she was considered a criminal, that she would be arrested as a prostitute.
If in that situation, no. But in a normal situation, yeah, a girl's on the street selling sex, then she would be arrested as a prostitute. That's still like that today.
But is law enforcement informed that there's a difference between voluntary prostitution and enslavement?
Yes, they are informed, but not to the extent that it should be. For example, the NYPD has over 43,000 police officers. Only 10 of them are dedicated to human trafficking. Oh, really? And 2 of those are supervisors, which are white shirts, so they don't really investigate those crimes, which means 8 police officers in New York City investigate human trafficking cases.
Now, have they had any special training?
Those 10 officers did have specialized training. But the problem is if you walk up to a NYPD police officer in the street and ask them, hey, are you aware of human trafficking in the city? They don't know what you're talking about. Mm. And so one of the things that our organization does, one of the things that we do is we go and we actually hand out awareness pamphlets printed by the Department of Justice for law enforcement, and we just give it to the police officers. You know, hey, are you aware of human trafficking? Yeah, we get training on it. Okay, well, here you go, you can have this.
Are they receptive?
Some are, some aren't. Mm-hmm. But as communities start getting involved and communities start working more closely with law enforcement, then the law enforcement will start becoming more and more aware of the problem.
So let's start with communities then.
Right.
What can communities do?
Well, one of the things that we do is we actually, by request, we go to communities and we do speaking presentations to inform them what human trafficking is, where it comes from, who the victims are, who the criminals are, and more importantly, what they can do to take action in their community specifically. Because human trafficking has been reported in all 50 states across the United States. It's in all cities, big and small, so it is everywhere. And it's very important that these communities kind of take action and learn about the issue. So we actually teach them how to start community watch groups, how to start community profiles, which get turned over to law enforcement for investigations. And they start a youth group to protect the youth and to keep them from being vulnerable to this crime. And it's really a purely grassroots attempt to stop this crime.
So it would be community organizations like League of Women Voters and Rotary.
Right. Well, we've actually even had churches that have called us and said, hey, can you come down and speak to our church? And then the church will take initiative and they'll starting, they'll pass out flyers, they'll start kind of informing their neighbors, and little by little, blocks and blocks of people start coming together. So it not only prevents human trafficking or, sexual assault, which is very widespread in the United States, but it also builds a sense of, ownership in your community. So we're building communities as well as preventing crime.
Which reminds me, I really want to make sure that we don't finish this program without giving your website. I see it's on the screen now, www.HTA, Human Trafficking Awareness Council.org. We're also referring to the Polaris Project, which is www.polarisproject.org. And there is a national hotline. There it is. National Human Trafficking Resource Center has a 24-hour national hotline, and there is the telephone number there. So if people are concerned about it or wondering about what's going on, those are good places to go. But I'm very interested in whether there are signs or any red flags for us to know whether a business is legitimate or whether it's an enslaving business. For instance, there are massage parlors in many, many of our shopping malls. Are there any ways in which we would know whether this is a suspect place or whether it's a legitimate business?
It's very, very hard to determine that. And that's mostly due to our government. We have licenses, we have certificates, and we have different types of regulatory bodies that govern certain jobs. Mm-hmm. New Jersey specifically, we need to focus on issuing licenses for massage parlor technicians.
Oh, they don't have them now?
No, they issue certificates.
Uh-huh.
Certificates can be reproduced, certificates can be copied, certificates aren't held accountable, so they don't follow up. And you can easily alter those certificates to be somebody else's name and number, mm-hmm. and now you have a human trafficking victim working under this certificate that's on the wall that isn't a real certificate.
It looks legitimate.
Right. And that's another thing. Most states require that a certificate be posted on the wall, just like a massage parlor or a nail salon. They have their certificate, right? So if you go into a location and you don't see certificates on the wall, then that could be a red flag that, hey, where's your certificates? And you can even ask, say, hey, can I see your certificate for this employee before I let them work on me? And if they don't want to give it, then I would go and I would call the national hotline phone number, opposed to law enforcement, because so many law enforcement are untrained on how to proceed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But isn't that a risky business? I mean, coming up against these people for an individual?
For an individual, it could be risky. I mean, but the good thing is about good people is there's more than one. And when one person in a community stands up, next thing you know, 10 people are behind them, and then 100 people, and then 1,000 people. So it's not something that you should fear because it is your community. Mm-hmm. And you should not fear your community.
But if it's so lucrative, and you're coming out against it, it may be that there are people there who are really going to take some kind of vengeance against you.
The likelihood, I think, would be slim. they'll make threats, but I think a lot of those threats are empty threats. Because if they go out and they start hurting people, now they're focusing law enforcement on them. Because law enforcement isn't focused on them because they're human trafficking. Remember, there's no funding for that. But if you go out and you start beating people up and killing people, now the police officers really have a big problem.
Yes.
Because now it's a violent crime happening in their community. So you're going to start drawing more attention to yourself, which is what they don't want to do. So by you speaking up, the likelihood of you being hurt for that is very, very rare, because they know that if they start hurting people, then the police are going to start cracking down on them. And right now they're kind of flying under the radar, and they don't want to raise up to where they start getting noticed.
So tell us the other, you talked about community education, so to speak, and training of law enforcement. Tell us about the other areas that you approach human trafficking in.
Well, another thing that HTA does is we investigate current and ongoing cases of human trafficking. So these are cases that the victim of human trafficking has been rescued. So they could be receiving benefits from the government if they assist with the prosecution of their captors. So we just kind of monitor the cases to make sure that there is legal action, appropriate legal action being taken, and that the cases are being tried accordingly. And these lenient sentences, like a 3-year sentence,
that what you had in Florida?
Yeah, that doesn't happen. And if it does happen, it becomes public record, and people know about it. A prime example of that is in August 2011, just a couple months ago, a man by the name of Marvell Scott, he used to be a Channel 7 news broadcaster. He purchased a prostitute, 14 years old, in Times Square. And
purchased the services of the prostitute,
yes,
or actually purchased?
He purchased the services of a prostitute who was a runaway from Albany, an American girl, ran away from home, met up with this guy in New York City, and he started pimping her out on the street. And he brought her back to the hotel room. She said, "No, I don't want to do this. I changed my mind." He brought her back downstairs, went to the pimp and said, "Give me my money back. I don't want to do this. She don't want to work. Give me my money back." The pimp talked to her, sent her back upstairs with another girl who was a 16-year-old who witnessed the entire thing. While he was having sex with her, she told him to stop twice, which now it's a clear sign of rape, and it's a rape of a 14-year-old girl. When that went to trial and they allowed him to plead guilty in August 2011, he received 20 days community service. Yeah.
Wow, that's a shock. You know, this time has gone so quickly. I feel that we're just at the beginning, because I know that you're involved in a few other initiatives that we would have liked to have heard about, and I hope that you'll come back again and we can finish with the work that you're doing in foreign countries, because that would make a difference in terms of the numbers of young people who come here expecting a better life, and maybe if they had the better life at home, we'd be able to reduce their numbers.
Right, that's the plan.
Thank you very much, and we'll do it again.
Definitely, thank you.